Dunkirk, directed by Christopher Nolan. It's based during World War II, and you've got the British Army along with the Allies. They are forced onto the French coast by the Nazis, Dunkirk, and this movie tells the story of the Dunkirk evacuation, and it tells that story from three different perspectives: the land, the sea, and the air. And those three different perspectives, the land, the sea, and the air, they're interwoven into a non-linear narrative. You've got the past, you've got the future, and you've got the present, and they don't play out in chronological order. So you might be watching something that's based, say, in the present, and then straight after that moment, you'll be witnessing a scene or a moment that happened before that moment you just watched. And sometimes, if not done right, it can throw you out of the film. And Christopher Nolan did a good job at making sure you wasn't thrown out of the picture. He did a great job at achieving that. It didn't throw you out of the film. It wasn't like, oh, what the hell's happening now? He did a really good job of making sure the narrative flowed very, very well, even though it's not played out in chronological order. It was very, very fluid. It wasn't clunky or didn't throw you out of the picture or the story. It flowed very well, and by filming it like this, by telling the story in this way, I felt it was really immersive, and it actually added a lot more tension to the film. It really helped immerse you into the film and the story. The movie overall contained very little dialogue, but the story is told through very powerful images and performances, and as a result made this a very suspenseful experience, as well as being very intense. This movie was so incredibly intense. I loved the cinematography in this film. It was a beautiful film to look at with some stunning and powerful images. Which were very rich, with a lot of detail, with a lot of scope, and it looked very epic. The way this film was shot was beautiful. I also adored the sound design in this film right from the start. I mean, that really sort of struck me first, was the sound in this movie. You hear every single detail, and it was technologically, this is a stunning movie as well. But it's got very little CGI as well. I think there's only one scene that popped to my head but had CGI in it, and I think that was a bit of an explosion. But about 99% of this movie was practical effects, and I loved that. And it showed on the screen. Everything looked real, and as a result, it helped immerse you into this story and what was going on, and it felt raw and real and gritty. This was a very intense and nerve-wracking movie, very, very suspenseful, and Christopher Nolan is pretty good at doing this, at creating intense moments and suspenseful scenes. He's quite good at doing this sort of gradual build up, and it really gets your heart racing, your pulse racing, and you're building up to a moment, and it gets incredibly tense. And a lot of directors fail at doing that, but Christopher Nolan is a master at doing this. He did it with the Dark Knight trilogy, and he's done it again here, and it is incredible. So yeah, the movie is full of moments with gradual escalation. You know something is coming, there's a threat coming, and you've got this build-up that gets more intense, and it just intensifies even more, and my heart was racing throughout the duration of this film. And that's purely the way it was crafted and directed by Nolan, and how he sort of edited these scenes, and again goes back to the way the narrative is sort of interwoven. Again, that helped intensify this movie as a whole. The aerial combat in this movie was stunning. Everything was real. At least it looked real. They were actual World War II planes, from what I believe. And like I said, back to the CGI, there was very, very little CGI. I think it was when they needed that sort of sudden burst of an explosion. I think that was the only moment this film contained CGI. And everything just looked real. And just the way these aerial combat scenes were shot was stunning. I adored it. And it was, like I said, intense again. The way those scenes were shot was very intense, very immersive, and the aerial combat scenes felt very real as well. And Tom Hardy plays one of the pilots, and again, very, very, very minimal dialogue. He hardly says anything, and he's usually got a mask that covers his face, but you could tell it's Tom Hardy with the eyes anyway. But you sort of grew emotionally attached to all of these characters, even though they don't really get much dialogue and you don't really get to know them. This movie didn't need to rely solely on just one character to sort of lead the story. This, at the end of the day, there were a lot of people involved in this conflict. That's why I like they went down the route of 3 different perspectives, the land, the sea and the air, and they told it through those 3 different perspectives, because this was more than just one person. There were a lot of people in this conflict, and there were a lot of people trying to get off that beach. And so I like the fact that Christopher Nolan chose to shoot the film like this and to tell this story in this way. I really appreciated that. I think it was the right thing to do, to shoot this film, to shoot these events in this way, and not just have sort of one character, you know, focus on this one character and then have a lot, you know, loads of dialogue, you know, with loads of exposition, dialogue and all of that. I really appreciated that the film had minimal dialogue. And it was almost as if you were witnessing this as it was happening. It felt like as an audience member, I was actually there experiencing these terrible events. And, you know, those people just trying to get off the beach. You could sort of feel the fear. You could sense the fear and the dread, and, you know, and the urge of just wanting to get off that beach. And it became a much more immersive experience. And this goes back to me saying that, you know, this film just felt very, very real. It was a very real sort of experience, and a very emotional one as well. And the way in which these characters were sort of brought to life on the screen, it made the film feel more real. At the end of the day, they were telling a story based on true events. You know, this actually happened, and I'm very, very happy that Nolan chose to portray these characters in this way with minimal dialogue, because as a result it felt more real. I adored the soundtrack by Hans Zimmer. I thought it was a beautiful soundtrack. There were moments which I would describe as being a little euphoric, you could say, moments where the boats that have been asked to go in, or not asked but told to go in to rescue the soldiers from the beach. And that moment when they finally arrive at the beach, and I teared up, and along with the soundtrack, it was very sort of, the soundtrack accompanied this movie very, very well, and again, it helped add a lot of the tension and the suspense and the emotion. This movie, this viewing experience overall was an emotional ride. This movie was masterfully crafted and directed by Christopher Nolan, and I felt like it paid a lot of respect, and, you know, it honoured those as well that actually went and tried to rescue the soldiers from that beach. You know, you got Mark Rylance's character, who's he's a mariner, and he's got his 2 boys with him, and all of a sudden one day they're going out to rescue these soldiers. It was very powerful. It was very emotional, and I think the movie really did honour those very, very in the best way possible. Mark Rylance was very, very good. Harry Styles, I'm going to mention Harry Styles, was surprisingly good. Harry Styles was actually very, very good in this film. He didn't stick out like another certain cameo in one of the most recent episodes of Game of Thrones. You know the one I'm talking about. He really sort of embodied this role, and he delivered quite a strong performance. He was very, very good. Kenneth Branagh as a commander, he was absolutely great in this film. I really, really liked his performance. But the performance that stood out to me was I think it's a Fionn Whitehead. And he plays Tommy, a British Army private. And the film starts with him, with his character, and then you eventually branch off to the other characters. But his performance was very real. It felt real and natural, and I believed into his performance. The same goes for Harry Styles and all of the others as well. You believed in their performances. You believed they were actually there experiencing these really, these horrific events. So yeah, performance-wise, from all of the cast, they were all very, very good, and that really sums up this movie. This movie, for me, was flawless. This was a stunning, epic movie but not the sort of epic you would be thinking. It's epic, but it's more of an intimate epic. It's very intimate. It's very suspenseful. It's very intense. It's very powerful. It's very emotional. It's very well crafted and directed by Christopher Nolan. The soundtrack is beautiful. It accompanies the movie very, very well. And when you get those moments that sort of express solidarity, like as in moments when you've got all those mariners and fishermen, you know, they're not in the army. They just, you're an average person back home. When they all finally turn up, it is emotional. And Nolan did a great job at immersing you or me as an audience member, you know, watching this film. He did a great job at immersing you into this picture, and it felt like I was experiencing these events. It was so suspenseful and, you know, intense. It felt like you were there on the beach and you just wanted to get off it. I actually overheard one of the audience members when coming out to the screening. He was an older guy, and I overheard him saying, "God, it felt like we were on the beach," and it did. And I smiled when I heard that, because I thought exactly that. I mean, this film, it felt like you were there, and it did. Everything just felt real, and yeah, it was a very powerful movie. And along with the way in which this film was crafted, with the soundtrack, the editing, the sound design, the performance, the direction by Nolan, this movie, for me, was a masterpiece. And I think you've delivered one of the best war movies ever in cinema. And one that pays a lot of respect and doesn't sort of glorify what happened. This movie doesn't glorify events, true events. This movie, for me, really sort of depicted what really happened and what people went through when they were in those situations and what they would do under pressure. Because this was what you witnessed during the film. You witness what happens to people when they put under an incredible amount of pressure, or they put through something that can be very traumatizing. And you witness this. I absolutely adored this movie. It was an emotional ride. I will be giving Dunkirk an A+. What did you guys think of Dunkirk? Let me know below. Do you disagree or agree with anything that I said? Let me know below. Thank you again for watching. I really do appreciate it. And if you like me, you love film, you love cinema, you're a big geek like me, then why not hit subscribe?